Hi everybody. Good morning. My name is Polly Morris and I am here today to talk with you about stigma, addiction, and recovery. Now, I'd like to just ask a question about how many people, and if you've ever seen me speak before, I always ask this question. How many of you have been impacted by your own or someone else's use of alcohol and drugs? If you could raise your hand, keep it up. Yeah. So the majority of the room has their hands up. That's like our data. Like, we don't need to know that we have a problem. You can put your hands down. We don't need to know statistics. We can see that people who have been impacted, that's our data. So 23.5 million Americans are in active addiction today. Of those 23.5 million, for every one, there are 4 to 6 people impacted. So more than likely, we all know someone who has addiction problems, either with alcohol or with some kind of drugs. We all pretty much have been impacted by that. Fair to say? Great. Our objectives for today, we're going to define stigma, we're going to define addiction, and we're going to define recovery, and then we're going to have a general understanding of how they are with people today and how we can improve upon what we offer. So what is stigma? When you see someone who's different from you for whatever reason, different colored skin, different colored clothes, different colored speech, and you immediately have this feeling and belief that I don't like them for whatever. They're different than me. I don't understand what they're saying. I don't understand what they're doing, and I don't necessarily want to. I'm going to stay over here with the people that I know and what's familiar to me. And that's how stigma starts. You can see on your definitions here, which I'm not going to read. You can feel free to read those, but it's like you see someone who's different from you and they're automatically considered inferior to you, like they're less than. You see somebody different from you and you want to avoid them, maybe out of fear of what we don't know. So stigma is the attitudes and beliefs that someone we don't know and we fear is not someone that's positive. It's somebody we're going to hold in disdain. So it's negative. Stigma is negative. So there's a cycle of stigma where we start to label somebody. We see somebody and we say, hey, you Joe. Joe over there, he's from Italy, ha ha. We make fun of somebody. We start with this. It's just fun. And then labels become stronger. People become discriminated against. People with addiction issues come into a hospital or a medical facility or anywhere, a community office, and they automatically have their own feelings of how they feel going in there. Scared, fear, misunderstanding. And then the feelings of shame and guilt and remorse and being embarrassed to be where you are in addiction, and then coming into a place, not only do you have your internal stigma, but now you have your external stigma. So you're carrying that all around. It's a vicious cycle. We've seen the media represent people with addiction in a horrible way. We've seen the before and after pictures of people where in the first picture they have like no teeth and they look terrible. I have had cancer, so I can speak to this. When I was getting my cancer treatment, there was no before and after pictures being shown. It was a medical condition that people treated me with respect and dignity, and I talked about my recovery with the medications, but addiction, another medical condition, we say, you got to go here every morning to get your meds, and we say, we're not going to provide you with medication. We just treat people so poorly. The drug war it's been a drug war against people, not against drugs. So the shame and blame and the terrorist way that people with addictions are portrayed as in the media is just awful. It's just not true. So what is discrimination? Stigma is the whole stereotyping vicious cycle we just talked about that imposes the shame and blame and things we have on those people, right? So discrimination now is, I don't know you, I don't like you, I fear you, I have opportunities, I am not going to offer them to you because I don't like you, I don't understand you. But I'll keep them over here. So the stigma is the thought process, the attitudes, the beliefs. The discrimination is the action. So what is addiction? Well, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, addiction is a chronic, relapsing brain disease that is characterized by compulsive drug use and seeking, despite harmful consequences. Let's just break that down a little bit for me anyway. So chronic, that long-term, ongoing, reoccurring, and then the relapsing, so you may have been going all right for a while, and then boom, you sort of fell off that wagon or however, bump in the road. And then the next thing is a brain disease. Wait a minute, my brain is an organ in my body just like anything else, right? Liver, kidney, spleen, bladder. However, the brain just happens to control everybody else. So when the brain is diseased, that's what happens, right? Characterized now by compulsive drug use and seeking, or drug seeking and use. Compulsive. What does compulsive mean? You cannot resist it. It's like meat and chocolate. You can't resist it. Your brain is telling you, you have to have this substance, right? Chronic, relapsing, reoccurring. Your brain telling you, I've got to have this. I can't resist it. So I've got to seek the drugs and use them, despite the harmful consequences that I don't have any money, and so I'm going to steal this out of my partner's purse and go and get what I need. Or I got pulled over by the police last night, and I had some cannabis in my car, so now they might charge me. Or I get a DWI, and now I've got a charge, it's a misdemeanor. Or, despite harmful consequences, I got caught with some drugs, my charges are pending, and I couldn't get any medication to help me feel better, so I went into withdrawal, and then I got another felony. What does that mean? I can't get an apartment, I can't go in the military, I may not be able to get into some colleges, and I have to check that square box that I have a felony when I'm trying to get a job. So addiction is that whole process of your brain telling you what to do despite what's going on around you over anything else. So we're going to watch a 4-minute video by the Addiction Policy Forum, and 4 minutes, all is 4 minutes, but it has some really good infographics about how addiction is and how it hijacks the brain that I thought was worthy. So we're going to take a quick and watch that.
What is addiction? Also called a substance use disorder. Over 21 million people nationwide suffer from addiction, and 1 in 7 people will experience addiction at some point in their life. Recent increases in the use of opioids have compounded the problem. Each day, we lose 174 people to drug overdoses, and that number climbs to 415 if you factor in alcohol-related deaths. Scientists first began to understand addiction as a brain disorder in the 1950s. Doctors Olds and Milner, in laboratory studies of rats, found the parts of the brain affected by addiction. But then, in 1994, Doctors Volkoff and Shelbert, top neuroscientists, ran PET scans of the brain that showed the effects of substance use disorders. Like other diseases, these scans showed it affected tissue function. There are 2 main parts of the brain affected by drug use: the limbic system and the cortex. The limbic system, located deep within the brain, is responsible for our basic survival instincts. So when you do essential things to stay alive, like eat, drink, find shelter, have sex, or care for your young, your brain reinforces behaviors that cause the release of dopamine from this region. That reward for surviving is also transmitted to the amygdala and hippocampus, which records a memory of that feeling, so we seek it again. This is our survival hardwiring. Addiction also affects this area, up here, in the prefrontal cortex, which is what separates us from other animals. This is where decision-making and impulse control live. When drugs or alcohol are used, they activate the same dopamine process in the survival center, and when use is repeated, that substance can hijack that part of the brain. This hijacker changes the brain and weakens this system to make it believe that the primary need for survival is the drug. In hijacking the brain, it can usurp those primary motivations: food, water, shelter, sex, and protecting our young. And the hijacker needs more and more of the substance to activate the same level of reward or feeling of pleasure, causing the brain tissue to become increasingly damaged with continued drug use. So why don't all people who use alcohol or drugs become addicted? There are factors that contribute to the development of a substance use disorder, including individual factors, like genes and age of exposure, and then environmental factors, like drug availability. But there is good news. Addiction is preventable. The key factors that aid in preventing addiction can be categorized into two parts: risk factors and protective factors. Protective factors range from parental involvement, programs that improve self-control, limiting availability, and increasing attachment to your community. Another key element in preventing substance use disorders is to delay when use begins. Put simply, prevention is about delaying the onset of first use. In the adolescent brain, where brain tissue is more vulnerable, the hijacker is more prone to weaken the brain and plant itself as a disease. Those with substance use disorders commonly initiate first use much earlier, between 12 and 18 years old, which increases the likelihood of the hijacker taking hold. But if the hijacker takes hold, addiction is treatable. Advancements have been made in assessments, detox, treatment programs, recovery supports, and medications to treat addiction. Brain scans show that once in recovery, the tissue in the limbic system and cortex can get better. With your help, we can expand these innovations to help millions of individuals and families and ensure that addiction is treated as the medical issue that it is. Together, we can solve this. Join us.
That video was pretty good. I do like the infographics. So as the definition and that video talk about the brain being hijacked, you know, they say that addiction is genetic, it is environmental, so nature versus nurture. For me, my parents, alcohol was part of their lives and their families. My parents were older, and they would give me sips of their drinks when I was just a baby to try to make me be quiet. And it never ever worked. Never ever worked. You know how your parents would give you like a little booze in there for Ambosol or whatever? So did all that, and then my parents, there was 8 kids in my family, right? 8 kids. And then my sister and I are the last 2. I don't know why you would want to have 2 more and have twins, forget it, but anywho. So my parents, every day my dad would come home at 5 o'clock. And he would sit down at the kitchen table and have a martini, and my mom would have one. Dad would have an olive, Mom would have a lemon, and I learned how to make a martini at a very young age, Manhattans too. So that they would do that. That was a regular thing with them, and my dad would, at the end of his drink, save me that gin-soaked green olive, and I would feel so special. Here you go, Penelope. A fond moment. But the idea is that my parents, this was something they did every single day. Some people would call them maintenance drinkers. Some people would say they had their own addiction, they couldn't go without it. I know my mom, 86 years, she had a little sponge of wine before she died. Anywho, as kids, we were also encouraged to drink. We were allowed to have Boone's Farm wine. Anybody remember the Boone's Farm? Like 13% alcohol or something, strawberry flavored or whatever. We had that in fancy Aunt Marcella's glasses. And then every now and again, my dad would let us have a little creme de menthe or a little drambuie on our ice cream. Like, come on, kids, that's childhood, right? So alcohol was not something that I ever shied away from. I watched my sisters and brothers, my siblings, in their ways. And so at one point, like in 5th grade or so, my first drunk, I stole a 6-pack of PBRs, Pabst-Blue Ribbons, PBRs, and I stashed them out back. Now that's a big feat in itself because I have 7 siblings who are all trying to do the same thing. So I invite my friends over. I invite Patty and Lori, BFFs forever. I invite Carol and Barb Dravant, my neighbors across the street, they're sisters. And then I invite my friend Bomar. So we've all got enough to have one of these cans of beer. And they're nice and warm by now. Woo! And so we go out back, and we all have our beers. And then BFFs, they say, oh, we're only going to split one. So, okay, whatever. And then, of course, the sisters have to copy that, right? So then they split one. Bohm has 1. I have 3. Yes, I have 3, and then they're all like, woo, 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 and I'm like, this is awesome, bring it on, I love this, which is crazy. But it just shows I drank differently from a young age. Was that environmental? Was that my genetics? I don't know. So then, the progression of any kind of addiction is the more you do it, the more your tolerance builds, and the more you need to feel that buzz or whatever you're trying to achieve, to feel that liquid courage. In my case, that's what it often was, because I have high anxiety, so oftentimes I just needed that little something, something. Although that's kind of a lie, because it was never little. Anyway, so addiction, in my world, really wreaked havoc when I got a little bit older. I was in high school, and I was drinking like every night of the week in high school, every weekend in junior high, and then I decided to go away to school, to music school. And my first year, I'm in Syracuse, New York. I've got some great roommates, and I'm having a great time. I'm on the dean's list. I'm just doing well. And we're drinking, we're partying, we're hanging. It's great. Second year, back in school, had gone home for the summer and really partied it up with my friends. Haven't seen you in a while. And so the second year, I never even got a place to live. I just couch surfed, and some nights just didn't go anywhere. And I fell in love with this guy, and it wasn't reciprocated. And so I took this sort of mental health spiral where my anxiety got like wicked high. And the depression, counteracted that. So I was just in a state of confusion and depression and nauseous and nervous. So I started drinking, right? That's my solution at the time to everything I need is alcohol. And usually if I have alcohol, then I'm more likely to say yes to anything else that comes my way. So I'm drinking, and I'm drinking alone, and I'm drinking a lot alone. And so my mental health and my addiction really took a turn at that time to just, bam, go crazy. So I dropped out of school. I moved to Vermont, to Stratton Mountain, to work at this place called Liftline Lodge a million years ago, before it was fancy schmancy shopping town that it is now, if anybody's familiar with Stratton. And I met my now ex-husband, and I knew I had a drinking problem. I mean, I could tell you, and I would use bad language, poor language, and I would say, yeah, I'm an alcoholic, big deal. That means I can drink more than you, and if I do, you're buying, right? So, my now ex and I don't think the clue of the addiction was so strong, except for the fact that we followed the Grateful Dead for quite a while. No drugs there, right? So, that was just the scene. And then we came back to Vermont, and we decided that we wanted to settle down and have some kids. And I said, okay, well, I need to get ready to have kids. I need to stop drinking. I need to stop doing drugs and make it cool. And I couldn't do it. I could stop. I could stop, but I couldn't stay stopped, right? The old expression, how long can you hold your breath? So compulsive drug use and seeking, right? My brain is going like, what do you mean you're stopped? You're not drinking? You're not drinking? What? And so as I'm getting pregnant, my anxiety is getting, not as I'm getting pregnant, while I'm pregnant, my anxiety is getting a little out of control. And so I say to my doctor, this anxiety is really getting to me, what can I do? And he says, have a glass of wine. And I go, well, my doctor says I can have a glass of wine for my anxiety. Woohoo! So I do. I get anxious one afternoon, and I have a glass of wine. And then that leads to another glass of wine, and another glass of wine, and another glass of wine. And then what happens? Remember those feelings we talked about in the cycle? The guilt, the shame, the blame. I'm a terrible mother. My child is going to be born with fetal alcohol syndrome. Dave's going to find out and divorce me. His mother's going to kill me. My family's going to hate me. I am going to be a condemned woman because I drank and I ruined my child, my baby. And then, what do you do then, right? Then I feel like crap. So what do? Have a glass of wine, which leads to another glass of wine, which leads to another glass of wine. And you know what happens? The same thing, only worse. Now I feel even worse, and I can't get out of it. So the progression of the disease continues to strengthen And if you stop using for a while and then start again, as we often do when we get arrested or something happens where we're taking out of our environment of use and the withdrawal, and then you come back and your tolerance is crazy and you'll use and you'll die because you're not used to it. So the definition of addiction is your brain is telling you, please go get this and use it. It's the only thing you need. You don't need your kids. You don't need, like in the video, right? You don't need your kids. You don't need transportation. You don't need food. You don't need basic living. You don't need any of those things. You just need this to feel better. My brain made me do it. What I want to do is talk about some of the stereotypical names that we call people when we're referring to them. And I'll give you an example of what I mean when we say, those people. And I always use the quotes because I hear it all the time. I don't want those people in my backyard, right? The NIMBYs, not in my backyard. I don't want those people living down the street from the school. I don't want those people coming to our department. I don't want those people coming in our store. They're scumbags. They're going to steal things. They're going to steal my wallet and help me look for it. Is that so? What do these people look like? What do we refer to them as? Give me a couple names. Elkie, lush, loser, dope fiend, crackhead. Gosh, there's so many other names out there. But so we use these names. Junkie is one of the worst ones. And addict and alcoholic. Those are words that we hear a lot. Abuser, user. So those are the things, and those all have such a negative connotation. So when we think about what someone looks like, and we hear, what does a junkie look like? What does an addict look like? What comes to your mind? Is it someone you know? Is it someone you saw on TV? Is it someone you saw in one of those ads before and after? It's a person. That's what it is, a person. So, what does a person with an addiction look like? Well, how about any of these folks, right? Look at the little old lady in the top. Her hand is really sore. Maybe she's got some Aspirin cream on there, or some codeine cream, or she's taking Percocets. We don't know. And who's that below her? That's Angelina Jolie. Supposedly she has a heroin addiction. I did not hear that from Brad. And what about those 3 millennials on the top? You don't know what's up with them. And then medical people, right? Nobody with a stethoscope around their neck could have an addiction problem. Could have a problem with drugs and alcohol. What's the access, right? So what does a person with an addiction look like? How about some of these folks? Look at those guys with the tats. Talk about ink, huh? I would cross the street if I saw them coming down the street. Although they'd probably be driving Harleys and drinking beer and being really loud, right? And they'd probably want to fight. Is that stereotyping? Anyway, those are some bad hombres. And who's the guy with the gauge? He looks like some kind of a cult leader. And who's the drunk in the middle? And why would an old lady be in with these people, right? Well, the old lady, her name is Zetta. I'm going to tell you a quick little story about Zetta. My friend Maureen is a nurse and a person in recovery. Now, Zetta is her sister-in-law. So Maureen's brother had to go in for heart surgery down in the city and asked Maureen to come and stay with Zetta. So Maureen does. They're not close, but she also knows that Zetta has dementia and that Zetta likes to drink. And I said Maureen's in recovery from drinking. So she goes to stay with Zetta, and the first night she's there, Zetta says, I have a cough. I need some cough syrup. And Maureen says, okay, I'll go get you some cough syrup. And Zetta says, and I don't want the generic brand, I want Robitussin. Okay, so Maureen goes and she gets the Robitussin. She brings the Robitussin back. Zetta, you need help with that? No, I got it. Okay. So Maureen takes off. She comes back a little while later, and you know what? Go. Zetta drank the whole bottle of Robitussin. She was feeling no pain. So Maureen, the nurse, calls 911, gets the EMTs over there as quick as she can. Well, the EMTs, they know Zetta, and they've been here before for just about the same reason. So the story here is that it doesn't matter what you're addicted to if you have an addiction. It could be food or your phone or sex or drugs or whatever, but the addiction will help you to find ways that are creative to get what you want. Some people might call that manipulation, but I think that people with addictions have the best creative thinking to get what they need ever. So these are some numbers from the CDC, and the idea of this is I wanted to see where we were before COVID. So you can see the little orange line that goes almost all the way up. That was fentanyl before COVID. We know we had a pretty big problem. There was a lot of people dying, but we were getting a hand on it. Methamphetamine has been increasing. So we thought by COVID things would be better underhand, and that at COVID nobody would be able to get the drugs across the borders and into our country, and so the sources would be cut off, and so people wouldn't be able to use, right? That didn't happen. So you can see here, and take it as a visual, I'm not going to go in and explain it all, but you can see that the rates increased during COVID, basically. We did not have any sources cut off. We had a very high increase. The surprising thing, or maybe not surprising, is that alcohol rates in New Hampshire rose by 10%. You say, well, that's not very much. Usually in a year they might rise by 2.3, 2.5%. So to shoot to 10%, that's pretty high. And I know there's variables. Restaurants were open, restaurants weren't. We were stocking up. Somebody had all the toilet paper and all the booze. I don't know. So the idea is that rates of addiction increased. And while we might not be seeing all that right now since we're coming out of it and we're all so happy, down the road a piece, the progression of addiction is going to manifest itself somewhere. And treatment is already pretty scarce. So we're hoping that, New Hampshire will be prepared, as will other states. We wanted to talk about those feelings that someone has, the chronic relapsing brain disease. How does that feel? Like, do you want it? Anybody want to become addicted when they grow up? Oh. But the mental piece, if you've ever experienced depression or anxiety or even just like elusive thoughts, I just can't quite grab it. Your brain has impacted for sure. But how about your emotions? So anybody who's ever used any kind of drugs or alcohol or medications can sometimes do that. They sort of shift your emotions around. They can become stronger. So I'm going to cry after I take this med. Or, I've been drinking and I'm so sad. I'm so happy. Some drugs are depressants. Some are stimulants. But the emotional toll it takes on someone, because they're constantly barraged by the stigma of our society and the discrimination or the threat of being locked up for a medical condition that they have to jump through hoops to get medication, life-saving medication for, it can be a heavy, taxing load. And then there's the physical symptoms. So COVID had some awful symptoms of like hearing about how people died during COVID, that was awful, sad. Withdrawal symptoms from these drugs, from Suboxone or from opiates or from methamphetamine, the withdrawal is so physically racking. I highlighted some of them in red, not even all of them. Like if I had a couple of these on one good day, I might call out sick from work. Tremors, shaking, diarrhea, constipation, vomiting. I sound like one of those commercials with the side effects, right? I mean, they have the emotional toil, and then you might be off coordination. You might, you're angry. Like, I just don't want to feel this way. And so you walk into the doctor's office and you look like crap. And you're withdrawing, so you feel like crap, and all you want is someone to hear you and perhaps listen to you and be with you for a few minutes instead of just going like, frequent flyers, awful crabby today, security. People are in pain. That's why they use drugs and alcohol. That's why. Why should we care? I think I just said it, but I'll say it again. Why should we care? At the beginning of this, we asked about raising your hand if you were impacted by someone or your own alcohol and drug use. So the assumption was that we all know someone. So the reason we should care is because, number one, they're people, just like us. We are the people. They are your mothers, they are your brothers, they are your sisters, they are the veterinarian, they are the postman, my postmaster. They are the insurance agent. They are the guy at the gas station, and they might go to meetings at night somewhere, or they might not, but they are here. And to continue to war on people, calling it a war on drugs, means we don't care. We've created poverty and drug abuse and sex trade with the limitations we have put on a medical condition that should be treated like any other. So what can you do right now? Woo! Well, you're here, and that is really, really great. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me here. And there's something you can do right now today. Change your language. Change the way you speak to people with an addiction and about people with addiction. So how can we do that? Well, instead of using some of those words we said before, like junkie, crackhead, dope fiend, elkie, maybe we say, oh, that's Polly. She's a person with an addiction. Or she's a person in recovery. Because which sounds better if I say, hi, I'm Polly, I'm an addict and an alcoholic. Or I say, hi, I'm Polly and I'm a person in long-term recovery. Which one sounds better? Well, the long-term recovery even sounds more professional, but it sounds like I'm making movement, like I'm taking action, like recovery, here I am. When I say I'm an addict and an alcoholic, it kind of makes me sort of sound like I'm still stuck in it. You don't really know where I am. So person-first language puts the person before the medical condition that they have. You can reference it by name if you like. Steve has a cocaine disorder, or Sheila has a problem with wine, or you can use different language than calling someone a schizophrenic or an alcoholic or an addict or an abuser or anything else that sounds negative and usually brings punitive consequences. There was a research study that was done, I believe out of Mass General, by the Addictionary here, and they had experts, counselors, a whole host of folks be on this panel, and they used the word user versus abuser. And the reference to abuser, the folks said that it should be more punitive, that it should be less treatment, it was their own fault, it was the person who, they did it to themselves, so what? The user was more friendly in the sense of, okay, maybe this person could use some treatment, okay, maybe this person, we aren't going to put him in jail, we'll just sort of get him into some diversion. That's an eye roll for sure. So the idea of person-first language is exactly that. Instead of referring to someone, like nobody ever called me, hey, cancer, or hey, tumor, come over here. Like nobody ever did that. Yet we'll yell across, he's an addict, don't worry. So just thinking about these things, the person is what really matters, regardless of the condition. A person with new shoes, a person with a bowling disorder, I don't know, but like the idea of we use some negative language for some things, it perpetuates the stigma. It perpetuates the negative things we have about people with addiction. And they're just people, there are people. We have words like abuser, addict, some of the things you hear. So instead of using those, again, just an extra stress on person first. And it doesn't come out like really easy because addict comes out pretty quick, alcoholic. So when you say like person with a, it's kind of hard to get that out there, but once you change that thought, that you have to pause long enough to change the wording in your mouth, to instead of addict, you go, oh, person with, that also has changed your feelings, and that will change your actions. So if you change that thought, you change the feelings, you change the actions, which is your behavior. That reduces stigma and discrimination. More people get help, less people die. I hear this all the time. People in recovery say, I've been clean 30 days. And I say, were you dirty before that? And people don't know what to say because we're so used to saying that. But that's the assumption. I'm clean now. Well, Okay, great. I like to say to people, well, what about recovery? How about a nice word like that? I'm in recovery, which we'll talk about more in this presentation if I ever get going. It's a process of change. So dirty, clean, get rid of them. We say a positive drug screen or a negative drug screen, and the word lapse and relapse, they just sound really punitive too. Reoccurrence or is active, back in active addiction. Like, there are words you can use. Again, it's changing how you think about it and using it more person-friendly, person first. So what is recovery, this elusive word? What is recovery? So according to SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live self-directed lives, and blah, blah, blah to their full potential. Great. What I like about it is it's a process of change. And there's no mention of drugs in here. Did you see that? Notice that? No alcohol or drugs in there. No bowling, no gaming. It's just recovery. So really, you could say if I was in recovery from heart surgery, after I just came out of heart surgery, I would be in recovery. People should learn to use that word more. But recovery is basically health, wellness. Recovery equals wellness, equals improvement, equals I want to be better in my life. I want to be the person that I was intended to be before I got so masked in this addiction and had no way out. I'm here, I found it. We should praise people who get into recovery. We should shout from the top of buildings, yay, you're still alive. During COVID, we forgot about that. So recovery is a process of change. And it's a wonderful change. You can see it in people's eyes. When they stop the active addiction, you can see the change happening. And people who are in active addiction don't often see that. And all we want you to do is reach out and say hello and support us. Love us till we can love ourselves. So recovery in New Hampshire, there's two kinds of services that are paid for by the state. Peer recovery support services. So research has shown that it's effective when you have someone who's been through the same experience you have or similar, and you can walk together down that same path of recovery or experiences that you're sharing. And so that's the gift of recovery coaching, peer-assisted recovery, is that I have experience with a lot of years of drug and alcohol use and the impacts on my family, my friends, my world, my life, definitely my career. I did a lot of research to get here, folks. So recovery coaching, peer recovery supports can really help because people, they know those feelings that you feel when you have that internal stigma. When I say I'm a shithead and I'm never going to be able to be a good mother again, like they say, they know the feelings of yourself, treating yourself like crap because of the internal struggles. So recovery coaching, you can go into these recovery centers. There's about 18 in New Hampshire, all over the state, and you can sign up and get a recovery coach. And that coach is somebody you go in and make an appointment with like anybody else, and you make a wellness plan. And the recovery coaches are trained professionals. They've taken quite an extensive amount of training to become a certified recovery support worker. That's the New Hampshire licensure certification. Or they're on their way and they're in the middle of training. And it's a lot, but it's wonderful training. So you've got these folks that are there to help guide you through what you need. And then there's telephone recovery support services, which is where if you're not quite sure you want to go into a center, you can call. A lot of the websites that have these little chat features that you can go in and talk to somebody and even be a little bit anonymous if you want. Like, there's nobody to pressure you, there's no coercion. We're going to treat you like a resource. We're going to say, what do you need? What can we do? How can we support you? And the telephone recovery supports are just a really great way to get some support without having to leave your home. Some of the activities that these centers do, they all have a multiple choice of meetings. So there could be 12-step meetings, there could be smart recovery meetings, which is sort of like a cognitive behavioral kind of group. I'm probably getting that wrong, but it's non-clinical, non-medical. And then you have like refuge recovery, and gosh, there's so many pathways into recovery. Exercise recovery, music. It's just these centers have so many activities going on. Parenting Journey and Recovery, a wonderful parenting program that we have in New Hampshire. And I encourage folks to connect with your local center. Here in this area, it's the Keene Serenity Center and Reality Check over in Jaffrey with Mary Drew. So the question was, what does a person with an addiction look like? These people, are they people with addictions? They're all in recovery, I know that for sure. And what do they all have in common? They're all smiling. They've all been to hell and back, and they're here today to tell about it, to help about it, to save other lives about it, and they're smiling. How about these folks? Again, people in recovery. There's Reality Check right in Jaffrey. Woohoo! We've got some Parenting Journey and Recovery. I told you about that. These people are happy people, and recovery is possible for anyone. Prevention works, treatment is effective, and recovery is possible. In closing, when a person you think they may have a problem with alcohol or drugs, don't accost them when they're under the influence. Keep yourself safe, but be truthful. Like, you don't have to sugarcoat anything. You're having a problem with this. I see it, I feel it. Let's do something about it together. Not, I'm throwing you out of the house. But like, how can I love you? How can we love each other and support each other through this medical condition? It's the same as having cancer, folks. I've had both. I know this from experience. You need support. You need people to lead you down the path and work together. So if it's one of your loved ones, share that you know about the recovery centers. And there's free services, and they can get a peer coach, or they could go to some of the meetings there, or meetings are online. And talk about 211. This is in our state. It's helpful for people to get access to treatment through the 211 in the doorways. You all are familiar with the doorways here. And just, like I said, just be honest and don't blame or shame yourself or the person that you love. Like, nobody asked. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, yeah, I always knew I wanted to become addicted. Just didn't know how to get there. Here are some of the resources that I will leave. And lastly, we have Zeta. Zeta wants to stop the stigma. Put the person first before the condition. A person with an addiction, a person with a cocaine use disorder, a person with a crack disorder. Doesn't really matter what it is. A person with cancer. It's person, not condition. The limits of our language are the limits of our world. When we see people with addiction as less than and not as people, that limits us. When we use language that's more dignifying and respectful of people with a medical condition, we stop the perpetuation of stigma and discrimination. That's the goal. Saving lives, that's the goal. Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you all for coming here today. This is a big deal. And you can go out of here today with your action step. Changing those language, change the thoughts, change those feelings, and that will change your actions, your behaviors. Can't go wrong. Okay, thank you.